And here we go on our Wednesday edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Mary Kay, news today. I guess we sort of were expecting it, but weren't 100% certain it would happen. But Kevin Stefanski did make the decision to sit Baker Mayfield, or, well, maybe it was a collaborative decision to sit Baker Mayfield in week 18 against the Cincinnati Bengals. And Baker Mayfield, as he told us on Monday night, is going to have surgery scheduled to repair that torn labrum in his left shoulder as soon as possible. So I guess just when Kevin comes on the Zoom call and tells us that, what was your initial reaction?
You know, I really wasn't surprised. Just a couple of hours earlier, I wrote a column saying that they should shut him down and that he should have the surgery as soon as possible. And glad I got the column up before Kevin died. But no, I mean, we could see it coming. If you read between the lines, obviously that's what Baker was basically saying last night. I mean, he's going to come out that strongly and say, now it's time for me to take care of my own interests and my own health moving forward. And I'm going to talk it over with my agent and my family. Well, then you really know what's coming. But this was the right decision because, he did get sacked 9 times yesterday. We're taping this on Tuesday. He did get sacked 9 times in that game. And as we've talked about so many other times before, any one of those sacks can result in another dislocation. A further dislocation can result in a broken bone or a more severely broken bone, and that could lead to a more serious surgery. As it stands right now, the full recovery to be back to 100% football action should be somewhere about 4 to 6 months. Now, I've talked to people today who think it could be a little bit shorter than that because it's his non-throwing shoulder. So therefore, he might be back doing full football action, 3 months from now. So we'll have to see how that goes. But it was the right decision to do it now. No reason to put him out in harm's way anymore, especially as challenged as they are at those tackle positions. And we've seen how the Bengals can get after it.
Are you surprised it took this long?
Well, I don't really think that he necessarily should have played in Pittsburgh. Once they were out of it and knowing that Pittsburgh was really going to bring it, at that point, I think that they probably should have taken him out of that game. But he practiced, he took the reps, and, it was kind of a longer week so that they had a little extra practice time. Case Keenum did not have any of the first team reps. It probably wouldn't have been that fair to yank Baker Mayfield out of that starting lineup for last night. But in terms of happening any sooner in the season, you know what? Just knowing Baker Mayfield the way that we have gotten to know him over these 4 years, I guess I'm not surprised, even though I wrote a long time ago that I think he should have considered shutting it down a lot sooner. He's just not that way. I mean, this is almost a contract year for him in some ways. And also, he wanted to try to get this team into the playoffs, a return to the playoffs. And I know he felt he was their best chance to do that. Now, as it turns out, with, Alex Van Pelt telling us about, the harness, handcuffing him and hindering him and all of that, maybe it would have been better off they all would have been better off if he had shut it down 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's just, I'm curious how we're going to look back on this ultimately. And maybe some of that depends on if Baker is here or not. Maybe they move on and it's just sort of a footnote to how Baker's career ended in Cleveland. But I do wonder if we're going to look back on this and say, like, man, somebody needed to step in. Either somebody in Baker's camp needed to step in and say, hey, shut this down for a couple of weeks. Or somebody on the Browns coaching staff or medical staff needed to step in and say, maybe we should shut this down for a couple of weeks. I mean, we saw Arizona do it kind of with Kyler Murray. I don't know. I wonder if, once we kind of get to that hindsight is 2020 part of looking back on this season, if we're going to say, what were they doing running him out there every week like that?
Well, I'll tell you what, Dan, if you look over his last, how many ever games, I don't have them up in front of me right now. I can pull them up in a minute. But if you look over his last 5 or 6 games, you will see a lot of ratings in the 50s, plenty of them. And that's about half of where you want to be at the end of a football game, right? You want to be up over 100. So to be in the 50s, all of those games, and to put only 17 points on the board in 10 of the last 13 games, none of those things are good. And I think that, I think Case Keenum could have done just as well, if not better, than ratings in the 50s and 17 points consistently. I think he could have. Now, he wouldn't have had a ton to work with either. The receiving core is very challenged this season. The tackles are either not there anymore or not having a good season. So the conditions are not right for good quarterback performances, but somehow I still think that they could have gotten better quarterback play out of someone had they played Case, him, or Baker Mayfield. Somehow, some way, they should have been able to do better than this.
So Kevin Stefanski didn't want to reflect on the season today when he was asked about Baker Mayfield, but the reality here is his season's over. Baker Mayfield's season is over. So these are the final numbers: 14 games, a 6-8 record, a 60.5% completion percentage, 3,010 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. Obviously, none of that is up to the standard of quarterback play in 2021. 20 years ago, a 60% completion percentage was fine and 3,000 yards, but that's just not the way the game is played anymore.